Imagine for a second, you're a pilot. The clouds roll in, and just like that, the entire world outside your cockpit disappears into a blanket of gray. You can't see the ground, you can't see the sky, you can't tell up from down. And worse, your body is screaming at you, absolutely convinced you're banking sharply to the right. But are you? This isn't just a bad dream. It's a very real and very dangerous phenomenon called spatial disorientation, and it's one of the deadliest traps a pilot can face. So let's get into why this happens and how pilots train to fight their own senses.
And I want to be clear, this is not just some theoretical problem. It has devastating real-world consequences. In late 2021, a helicopter carrying India's highest-ranking military official, the Chief of Defense Staff, went down in poor weather. The official investigation pointed directly to spatial disorientation as the cause. It's a tragic reminder that this sensory confusion can overwhelm even the most skilled and experienced professionals out there. So what exactly is spatial disorientation? Well, the textbook definition is a pilot's erroneous sense of their position, attitude, or motion. But let's just boil that down. It's the moment your brain gets it completely wrong. It's when what you feel is happening is the total opposite of what's actually happening to the aircraft. Your perception is no longer reality. To kind of get a feel for it, think about trying to walk in a perfectly straight line with a blindfold on. It's almost impossible, right? You inevitably start to curve off. That's because our entire sensory system, our whole body, is perfectly designed to keep us oriented on the ground, where down is always a constant. But once you're in the air, moving in 3 dimensions, well, those same senses that serve us so well on land can be easily and dangerously fooled.
So let's dig into that a little bit. How does our body even know which way is up? Let's take a look at our built-in biological GPS.
Okay, so check this out. This is what's called the orientation triad, and one thing just jumps right out. We are overwhelmingly reliant on a single sense. A whopping 90% of our sense of orientation comes from our vision, just 90%. Our inner ear and that seat-of-the-pants feeling, they only account for the other 10% combined. So you can see the problem, right? The moment you lose those visual cues, you've just lost 90% of the data your brain uses to stay upright.
Let's break that triad down. First, you've got your eyes, providing that big primary picture of the world. Then there's the vestibular system, deep inside your inner ear. Think of it like a tiny biological accelerometer and gyroscope, sensing rotation and changes in speed. And finally, you have your kinesthetic sense, that seat-of-the-pants feeling we talked about. It's basically your muscles and joints telling your brain about pressure and g-forces. On the ground, these 3 work together in perfect harmony. But in the air, that system can start to fall apart.
So what happens when that 90% is gone, and you're left with just your inner ear and your body to guide you? Well, that's when your brain starts to lie. It creates these incredibly powerful illusions that feel completely real.
The first big category of these illusions is called somatogyral illusions. It sounds complex, but if you break it down, somato just means body, and gyral means rotation. So these are illusions where your body falsely senses that it's turning, or just as dangerously, not turning, when it absolutely is.
The most common one by far is an illusion called the leans. Here's how it works. A pilot might enter a very slow, gradual bank, so slow that the fluid in their inner ear doesn't even register the turn. After a few moments, the body just adapts and accepts this new banked attitude as straight and level. But then, the pilot looks at the instruments, sees the air, and quickly rolls the wings level. Suddenly, the inner ear fluid sloshes, and the brain screams that the plane is now banking dangerously in the opposite direction. So, the pilot is flying perfectly level, but every fiber of their being is telling them they're tilted over.
Now, if a pilot gives in to that false feeling from the leans, it can lead to something much, much worse, the graveyard spiral. Convinced they're in a bank to the left, they correct by turning to the right. But remember, they were already in a right bank, so this correction only tightens the turn. As the turn gets steeper, the aircraft starts losing altitude. The pilot's instinct is to pull back on the controls to climb. But in the steep bank, pulling back just tightens the spiral even more. It's a catastrophic feedback loop, all started by a simple sensory mistake.
Okay, let's switch gears from feelings of motion to something you might see flying on a really dark night. You're staring out into the blackness and you fixate on a single distant light. You stare at it for a few seconds and... Wait, is that light moving? Is that another aircraft?
Chances are, it's not. What you're likely experiencing is a visual illusion called autokinesis. Your perception is that you're seeing a moving light, maybe another plane you need to avoid. But the reality is you're looking at a completely stationary point of light, like a bright star or a distant radio tower.
So what on earth is going on here? Well, our eyes are actually never perfectly still. They're always making tiny involuntary movements. Normally, our brain just edits this out because it has a stable background, the ground, the horizon, as a frame of reference. But against a pitch-black, featureless sky, there is no frame of reference. So the brain gets confused and misinterprets the movement of your own eye as the light itself moving. And what's crazy is this can start to happen after just 6 to 12 seconds of staring. It can easily lead to a pilot making a dangerous maneuver to avoid a collision with a star.
All right. Our next big category is somatogravic illusions. Again, somato for body, but this time gravic for, you guessed it, gravity. These illusions create false feelings of pitching up or pitching down, and they're all caused by changes in speed. This is a pretty wild trick gravity plays on our inner ear. When an aircraft accelerates forward rapidly, you get pushed back in your seat, right? Your brain, feeling that pressure, misinterprets it as the nose of the aircraft pitching up, giving you a powerful sensation of climbing. The exact opposite happens when you decelerate quickly. It feels like you're pitching down. A pilot who acts on this feeling, pushing the nose down during acceleration, could put the plane into a catastrophic dive. So, after hearing all this, you're probably wondering, how in the world do pilots fight back against their own brains? Well, the answer isn't in what they feel, it's in what they see on their panel. It all comes down to trusting the instruments.
This is the absolute golden rule. It's the mantra that's drilled into every single pilot from day one. When your body is screaming one thing and the instruments on the panel are showing you another, you have to believe the instruments. It's an incredible act of mental discipline to ignore every instinct you have.
Of course, the best way to survive these illusions is to prevent them from taking hold in the first place. This starts with tons of simulator training where pilots experience these illusions in a safe environment so they know what they feel like. They're also taught to get their eyes on their instruments before they even fly into a cloud, to use smooth and steady control inputs that won't confuse the inner ear, and to avoid sharp, sudden head movements which can trigger a nasty sense of tumbling.
And this just reinforces why those strategies are so critical. A pilot is most vulnerable to spatial disorientation anytime they lose their primary visual reference, the horizon. That means flying inside of clouds, dealing with poor visibility like fog or haze, and especially at night, flying over dark, unlit areas where the sky and the ground just blend into one black void.
And that really brings us to the final thought here. It's one thing to sit here and say, just trust the instruments. But try to imagine the sheer force of will that takes. Your entire being, every instinct hardwired into your brain for survival, is telling you that you're about to crash. To consciously ignore that powerful, visceral feeling and put your faith in a set of glowing dials and screens, that is a truly incredible feat. So I'll leave you with this question. In that moment of crisis, with everything on the line, do you think you could trust a machine over your own body?